Hi, Cinematic Enthuse here. Today is March 19th, 2024, and I'm going to attempt to go through about 3 or 4 movies that I saw recently, some for the first time, um, and just talk a little bit about them. Let's see, the first one that I wanted to go over is Murder, He Says, and that one had Fred MacMurray, uh, Marjorie Main, I guess was the other big name. And I had never seen Helen Walker before, but she reminded me a little bit of Priscilla Lane. And since I brought her up, Priscilla Lane from Arsenic and Old Lace, um, that's what this movie kind of reminded me of a little bit. I mean, obviously there's differences, but it has that kind of it's creepy. It's in a creepy house with some older members of the family who are up to questionable things. And I mean, that's kind of obvious from the get-go. So it's a little bit, it does have a similar tone, a similar vibe, and but yet it's very lighthearted. And I love that. Fred MacMurray, for me, really carries this film big time. Marjorie Main does carry it as well. I think between the two of them, if those two were not in it, it would be a flop. It would be just barely, because the script itself is pretty good. It's not on the script is that's where it's different from Arsenic and Old Lace, because Arsenic and Old Lace was on a very um, acclaimed play. The film was, taken basically from the acclaimed play that had been running, on Broadway for years. So, plus that's where they got the two women from. But the reason I'm kind of bringing these two together is because they both, you could probably put them back together, and you would have a nice double bill. Um, I would probably put Murder, He Says before Arsenic and Old Lace, because I think of the two films, Arsenic and Old Lace is the better film. Um, it's better written. Um, it's yeah, the pace of it is definitely much better. It never lags. There was a couple lagging moments in Murder, He Says, but very little considering. Fred had to carry the whole film pretty much, and as I said in an earlier video, he's so um, wonderfully. He plays like a surveyor, basically, like going out to investigate what happened to his predecessor, who went to this house and like disappeared. So it's got that kind of like right from the beginning of the movie, that something's amiss, and that's the mystery in itself. But it's also kind of in the backwoods area, basically in a small town. So that part of it is, definitely all the key things are represented, all the stereotypes that some of them were actually pretty accurate, but some are a little far-fetched, but um, maybe not really. But anyway, definitely worth seeing. I would put this as I'd say it's like a 3 star. Uh, let's move on to another movie because there's about 3 or 4 I want to go through. So I would totally recommend this. And I'll put the link in the comments if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube and you're watching this, you can find my YouTube channel in the link in bio on my link tree, which is www.linktr.ee/cinematic enthuse. So, yeah, so that was a really good one, really fun, and definitely recommended. Let's go over one that any movie that I say I was disappointed in, you should still see it. Okay. Um, This one was a little disappointing because it kind of lagged a little bit. This is called Forza Crowd. And Forza Crowd has, I think it's from, I'm going to check the date, 1938. So it's in that sweet spot of screwball comedies. And it's got a really good cast. Olivia de Havilland, um, Errol Flynn, Rosalind Russell, who I love, and Patrick Knowles, who, it was funny. I think he was kind of my first annoyance in this movie because I remember when I saw him, since we're just coming off of seeing It's Love I'm After, which if you check a previous video, I talked about that already. I may come back to it again in the future. But he's also in that movie with Olivia de Havilland. And I kept thinking the whole movie, in both that movie and this movie, Forza Crowd, which are basically made within a year of each other, those two people are in the same movie together, or in two movies together, same cast, different movie. I just kept thinking how bland he was and how boring, and I just thought, okay, well, in It's Love I'm After, his character is supposed to be dull and boring. So, okay, well done. And then in this movie, he plays kind of, in Forza Crowd, Patrick Knowles plays kind of a he plays the head of the newspaper. So you can go a lot of directions in that. I mean, certainly not a boring position, but he just played it kind of dull. And I just thought, oh, okay, well, maybe this guy that's all he does, So I'm not so sure what his deal is. But he just, every time I saw him on screen, I was like, oh, okay. The energy would get up to a certain point and then it would kind of come down when he was on screen, in my opinion. Now, the opposite of that was Rosalind Russell, who I just adore her. And she really, every second she's on screen in this movie is, your money is well spent. Your time is well spent. She's fabulous. In fact, I kind of wish she was in this movie more. I wish her role would have been bigger. It's prominent, but I think both Errol Flynn probably has the biggest role, the most screen time. And, it's interesting. Of course, he and Olivia de Havilland have a wonderful chemistry. And so you get to see that. And he has good chemistry. Errol Flynn has good chemistry with Rosalind Russell, too. And that was lovely. It's weird because I've seen him I know he's very capable at comedy because I saw him in another movie, which we may, look at some point, called The Feminine Touch, which was with him and Joan Blondell. And he was great. That was my first comedy with him in it that I'd ever seen of him, after seeing him in Adventures of Robin Hood and I can't remember the other pirate movies that he's been in, the swashbuckler movies. So, and I remember seeing The Feminine Touch and I was like, wow, he's pretty good at this, Of course, Joan Blondell is pretty awesome too. She's one of my favorites too. But anyway, in this movie, he's good, but he's better when he's on screen with Rosalind Russell, which isn't very often, unfortunately. I mean, it's obviously he has rapport with Olivia de Havilland, but he's got a lot of screen time with the father figure of the movie, and I can't remember his name, but he's quite good. He's a character actor. And he's okay with that, but it's I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is it's a little slow in parts. I found myself wanting to think about other things, and that's usually not a good sign if I'm sitting there going, okay, when's this going to be over? Especially if it's a comedy. Usually I try to get really into it, and there are parts of it that are really good, so it's worth watching. I just was expecting more because and okay, to be fair, this is something I did figure out afterwards. And this has nothing to do with the actors. I think because it was produced by Warner Brothers instead of, let's say, a Paramount or United Artists or Columbia or even MGM. Um, it just, Warner Brothers forte is not comedy. Now they've done some good comedies. Bride Came COD is a great comedy. But the Warner Brothers studio at that point was very much about gangster movies, historical epics, dramas, especially gangster movies, and also like social, current social dramas and stuff like that. They just really, I think I even read this in a book somewhere, a film book, that, they just didn't, their comedies tended to be more like a Larceny Inc. type comedy, like, which is a gangster comedy. You know what I mean? They just tended to be really good at anything having to do with gangsters. So because Forza Crowd is not a gangster film at all, it doesn't have any of that in it. It's kind of your, what you would typically say, like it's kind of like a newspaper slash romantic comedy, sort of. Definitely a career in honor of Women's History Month. A great chance to see Rosalind Russell in March in a career role where she plays a quote unquote newspaper man, which is what they called it back then. So, definitely a nice thing to see, because she's just, I love her career movies, especially her career comedies, because it's such a wonderful time in film history. So it's trying to kind of be like that. Uh, but it just kind of doesn't quite understand the pace. So yeah, so watch it, but bear in mind, it would be interesting if you watch it before the next film I'm going to talk about, because that's the order I did it in. And boy, can you see a difference. Woman Chases Man is the next film I'm going to talk about. And that is, I believe, 1937, but let me check on that. 1937. And I remember thinking when I was watching the movie, I was like, this is awesome. Joel McCrea, who I love in comedies, especially. Um, Miriam Hopkins, who I can kind of take her or leave her, but I really liked her in this movie. This character she played is a very, maybe it's because I love like a Rosalind Russell type character, like a reporter, a female reporter type character, or career woman type character from that time period. Joan Blondell sometimes played them too, and Miriam Hopkins did a great job with this Woman Chases Man movie. Really good. I mean, if I had to like, I no disrespect to Design for Living, but this is far more fun. Design for Living is a great comedy, but it's Lubitsch, of course, so it's got its sophisticated moments, which are wonderful. But it's not, in my opinion, it's and she's the lead in that. It's not as much fun as this movie is. Now, this is a shorter movie. It's one of these, I think, hour and 10 minutes or something. So it was probably intended to be kind of a B movie, or one of those shorter movies. And I loved it. The pace within the first minute, that the character of Joel McCrea, his like complete backstory within like literally less than 60 seconds, maybe less than, 2 minutes tops. You know exactly everything you need to know about Joel McCrea for the rest of the movie. They waste no time just telling you what's going on. And that, I mean, I like it. I don't want to make it sound like I only like movies that like get to the point quickly, because I love, I'll tell you about another movie coming up after this that is kind of the opposite of that. So I like, both approaches, but when it comes to this kind of a comedy, that's really very satisfying to have all the information up front, very quick, and it just takes off after that. I don't want to give away anything, so I gave that one three stars for sure. And sure enough, I was like watching it and I was thinking, you know, why is this so much better than the other one I just watched? And I kept thinking about production, about the studio. the studio that it was made in, because back then, this is something I had to learn, that certain studios had more experience with certain kinds of genres than others, based on whoever was working there or whoever was running it. Paramount had a huge rep for comedy because they had a lot of silent people who did silent comedy come over to be with them. I think United Artists, because it was run by Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks, obviously had a fairly good idea of how to do comedy as well. Not to say that they were on the set or anything. I'm just saying, I think sometimes a studio can have kind of a better idea of how to do that kind of work. So this is a United Artists production. And when I found that out, because I didn't know that watching it, I thought, man, this is really tight. I love the scenes. The set, the acting was great. It's fun. There's a lot of, um, there's a lot of people playing roles that they aren't supposed to be playing, and all the classic things that people call them tropes. This another pet peeve of mine. If you love comedy, you will want these things to happen. You will like the formula. So I enjoy that. Misunderstandings, all that sort of thing. Plus, there's a little bit of physical comedy in it too. And there's a lovely ending to it. The ending is, I'm not going to spoil it. It's really quite sweet. So, and you knew it was going to have a happy ending. It's a comedy, for God's sakes. So definitely watch that one. But for your own amusement, maybe watch Forza Crowd before Woman Chases Man, because or close enough to each other, and you'll see what I'm getting at with this kind of difference in tone and speed. Now, on the flip side, last night I finished. And by the way, the first two movies I'll give you the links to in the comments. And Woman Chases Man is available on Tubi, on the Tubi app, Tubi. So that's free. You can just download the Tubi app. And then North by Northwest, very famous film, 1959, Alfred Hitchcock, Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, Martin Landau, James Mason, Leo G. Carroll. There's a few other people I can't think, but those are the main characters. And of course, the train is a character, and the sets are characters, and all the other, just everything is a character in a Hitchcock movie. So so 1959. Now, this is the exact opposite of what I was saying at the beginning of Woman Chases Man, where within 60 seconds of a character's backstory. This is since now North by Northwest is is a little more of an epic kind of length. It's, what is it, 2 hours and 20 minutes or something? It's at least 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's it's got kind of an epic sweep to it. So what's nice about that is, because there's so much time spent moving from location to location in the movie, there's a lot of setup in scenes, which I love that. I never noticed that about this movie until I watched the exact opposite kind of movie before that. I think when you see kind of a very short, concise movie before a Hitchcock movie, which kind of spends its time setting up the scene, it's a little bit easier to see the difference between the two, and how different that is. It's just a different approach. And of course, Hitchcock, master of the camera, a great director, of course, but I just love his camera work too. And what's cool about this movie, I always like to say that this is And I wouldn't have known this had I not watched there's a DVD commentary, if you ever get the DVD version, with Ernest Lehman, Lehman. I'm not sure if it's two N's or one. He's the writer, and that's a very important thing to note. He's the screenwriter for North by Northwest because he won awards. And he's a fabulous writer, was a fabulous writer. But there's a couple things that he says on the commentary, which is like actually one of the best commentaries I've ever heard on film. And I've listened to quite a few of them. And this one is just, if you can get a copy of that DVD, you should totally listen to it. If it's available some other way, that's the one thing that I haven't really located on streaming services as a way to listen to commentary, especially on these famous films. But anyway, the one thing that I know, there's two things actually I was thinking of. One was he said that Hitch told him, and maybe this is also in a Hitchcock interview probably, that this movie was basically a collection of times when Hitchcock in real life said to Ernest Lehman, you know, I've always wanted to have a scene with ... You know, I've always wanted to have a scene with in the United Nations where so and so, blah, 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 blah. And so he's got United Nations, maybe not the exact thing he says in the interview, but he says he always wanted a scene, you know, on Mount Rushmore. So he got it. You know what I mean? This was like a collection of dreams come true for Hitchcock, which I think is really cool because, you know, it's very inspiring to hear that. I wish I would have known that back, you know, 30 plus years ago when I saw it, because I think when you know that, it really gives new meaning to the film, that this was kind of like these scenes that Hitchcock always wanted to do, and he finally got to do them, you know. So that's really cool. And there's another part that I thought was really cool that Ernest Lehman said, where he said to research for the film, he literally, they paid him to, I think they paid him, I'm assuming they did, to get on the 20th Century Limited train and go cross country. And I mean, you know, that never happens. It probably hasn't happened since. But I just thought that makes total sense because there's so many details of how the train looks and what's in it, and you just know that these, you know, everybody that's, well, at least the director and the writer, who are, you know, very important in setting up all the scenes, you know that they were very familiar with the 20th Century Limited in general. Because I remember hearing from my grandmother that that was a really nice um, upscale train line. You know, there's always train lines and overnight cars and stuff like that. And because she said she got to, I don't remember if she said she got to be on that one or not. She might have been able to be on that one once, but most of the time she said the ones that she was on, they were nice, but they weren't that nice, you know. And of course, by the time I was in, you know, middle school, I think that was when I was riding the train, and it didn't look like a subway, basically, with, you know, maybe a counter with somebody working the snack counter or something. It was nothing like that. And any of you who rode the train back in the 80s, you probably remember that too. Although I'm sure they're nice now. But anyway, so yeah, just the excitement of, and there's that one scene especially that I love where it's the camera shoots outside the window as the sun is setting and the trains going down the track. I just love that. That's one of the most beautiful shots in the whole movie, in my opinion. And of course, we all know about the famous crop duster scene, and that's interesting because I mean, this is kind of a bad color joke, but apparently they acted out the scene. Ernest Lehman and Hitchcock acted out, and of course, Ernest Lehman says, and Hitchcock was the bus. You know, fat joke basically. Um, not that funny, but whatever. Um, but there's other parts in it. There's other little. I think the reason why I love to watch North by Northwest over and over and over, besides the fact that it's Cary Grant and there's a lot of travel in it and it's Hitchcock, is it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of action in it, but there's tons of little quips here and there. Little, even James Mason gets to make a little joke. Um, well, actually, he gets to make at least a couple of them, and they're usually a little bit smarmy, like sarcastic, uh, very dry humor, but they're still kind of funny. And Cary Grant, of course, gets to kind of be a little flippant here and there, and he gets to kind of bicker with his mother, and the scene where he gets taken into the police station the first time, and there's just so many little moments where you get to see the Cary Grant from the 30s and 40s come through, and of course that's why Hitchcock called him. I think he called Cary Grant his favorite actor. So I think I'll wrap it up there. Um, but if you normally, I don't know if I'm always going to put like four movies into one video. It just happened that way. Um, it depends on how busy I am, how much time I have to watch something. I had a little bit of time this weekend, so that's why I was able to do this. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I will definitely post if you'd like to know what I'm going to watch next, or I would really love your suggestions as well. Look at the previous video that I did at the end. There was a Criterion screwball comedy list that you could choose from. Maybe I'll put the link to that in the comments for this, and it'll say like screwball comedy Criterion list or something like that. And you can suggest something from that, or you can suggest something else. Um, there's also music you can suggest as well. But yeah, so what I do is I usually post on Instagram what I'm going to be watching. And then, then I just put a link up. If I can find a link to it that's free, I usually post it either in the stories. And then once I do a video, you can see the link in the comments. Okay. I hope you have a wonderful week and weekend. And happy spring equinox. Today is March 19th. All right. Thank you.